Welcome, everyone, to Deprogrammed on Unsafe Space. This is our Thanksgiving Day special. Keri and I are off having our respective Thanksgivings today, but we did pre-record this for all of you, and with a little bit of a Thanksgiving theme. As always, you can follow us at Unsafe Show on Twitter. You can go to unsafeshow.com. You can go to patreon.com/unsafespace. What else? Keri, we have Facebook and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can go to Facebook Deprogrammed and also Facebook Unsafe Space.
Awesome. Well, welcome to our Thanksgiving Day special, Keri.
Thank you, Carter.
We want to... Yes, we are robotic.
I don't know why now that we're recording it, it's more awkward than it was when we did it live.
I know. That's okay. We can just, we'll pretend it's live. I don't like editing, so I'll leave this part in and we'll pretend it's live.
Yeah,
so
it'll be good. Cool.
We came up with a couple things we wanted to talk about. Partly we're starting to think about Thanksgiving as this opportunity. Well, if you look in the news, so I said I was going to start with the other article, Keri, but I kind of want to at least give some context here. So more in the past few years, but even this year, there's all this stuff from the left about, like, for example, 10 tips for trolling your Trump-supporting relatives this Thanksgiving, 2018 edition. And there's a lot more in previous years. And Thanksgiving has become this time where the left faints about how horrible it's going to have to be to go talk to their family because they might wear MAGA hats or some of them might have voted for Trump or whatever. And so there are these lists that came out. Maybe we should just start by walking through the silly list about 10 tips for trolling your Trump-supporting relatives, and then we can kind of talk about stuff that we think actually the crazy feminist SJW cousin of yours might actually bring up at the table and some things to talk about there. So. But I'm going to read, so this is by Amanda Dybert. She's the, it says Vice President of Al Gore's 24 Hours of Reality. I don't know what that is, but apparently it was successful enough for her to put in her title. So, 10
New York
tips.
Times #1 bestseller.
It does say that, but that's Love is Love, right? Or is that her phrase? I can't tell. Oh, 24 Hours of Reality is a New York Times bestseller. That's what she's saying. She doesn't use a lot of punctuation here. Because it also says writer vice president, which I believe is two separate titles. Anyway, she writes a lot. She's a good writer, and she writes a lot about this kind of stuff. And she's got a melodramatic letter to Trump supporters. But anyway,
those always work.
Yeah, they're great. It's you say you love me, but you don't. You hurt me. Your silence is violence. And, Keri?
And your words are violence.
And your words are violence. They're both.
Your
just
vote
violent.
is violence.
Yeah, everything about you is violent.
Can I say something about this article quickly as you start to get into it? Yeah. Before she even gets to the rules, I like that she says, I can hear my feedback, by the way.
Oh, I should turn you down. Okay.
So before she even gets to the rules, she says, first and foremost, prioritize your self-care. And then in the 2018 version, she says that too. And I just, that is so classically SJW. They're always talking about self-care. It's part of that thing about like not having enough spoons to do emotional labor.
Yeah. Yeah, there is this, I think we talked about this the other day, but there's this conflation of, quote, emotional trauma and like emotional trauma due to, there's a conflation of emotional trauma due to physical things happening and someone saying bad things to you, and they're kind of the same. It's like, Ben Shapiro's coming, or that's the same as like a tornado destroyed my house. Like there's the same, there's like no, they're both equally devastating. So.
And harmful.
Yeah.
And then she says, do what you can, do what you need, stand your ground, but only provoke as much as you feel safe and comfortable. This is an article about trolling people, but you need to prioritize your self-care. It's just, there's something kind of hypocritical there. It's like, this is how to antagonize people at Thanksgiving and be petty, but take care of yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, right? It's like, it's written to specifically like how to troll.
Yeah.
But like,
make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Make sure you have some chamomile tea and a nice hot bath. So, yeah, I mean, there was actually an article in GQ that says, wait, when was this article? I guess it was from last Thanksgiving, but it says, it's your civic duty to ruin Thanksgiving for your Trump supporting family members. It's just like, oh my God, some people. Anyway,
they're so petty.
I know.
Okay.
So that was my big takeaway from her tips. Let's go through her 10 tips. Yeah. Number 1 is donate to Native American charities. And when you and I read this, Keri and I, we were like, why would that bother us? I don't understand.
I mean, I'm not a Trump voter, just to clear it up for anybody who's new to watching the show. But I don't have any Trump voting relatives who would be. Why would they think Trump voters would be offended that you donated to a charity? It's like, cool, you donated to a charity, awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. What? That one I just don't understand. But that's going to make me talk more later about this, the myth of the noble savage, which I think is good to have, because people are going to likely bring up Native Americans and oppressive white people and smallpox blankets and crap at Thanksgiving, and so it'll be important to understand that. But that's her first one, which is like, well, a stupid way to troll. Like, go ahead, spend all of your money donating to charities. Why would I care?
Here's a good answer for that. If your SJW relative at Thanksgiving tells you that she donated to a Native American charity in your name, ask her why she gave money to Elizabeth Warren's 2020 campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, honestly, you could kind of give to any white person and just be like, yeah, they've probably got a little bit of Native American blood, just like Elizabeth Warren. It's fine.
As much as Elizabeth Warren does, yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is make sure your gratitude list is fully loaded, which didn't seem like a troll to me until I read it. And it was like, again, this was just like petty stuff. Make sure you say things like, you're thankful that we can all sit here together, like unlike the thousands of terrified children who are still separated from their parents at the border, right? Like, and move on to Robert Mueller and end with, I'm thankful that I never attended a party with Kavanaugh, right? It's first of all, it's passive aggressive. It's insanely childish, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, to the point of, I mean, the next one reminds me of finger painting. So let's just move on. It's like, it's not actually, but all I can imagine is finger paints. It says, the number 3 is create a seasonal holiday calendar. And it says, use your handprints to make a giant turkey. That's the first sentence there. And I just thought, like, my daughter stopped doing that around kindergarten. I don't know. Like, that's, what the hell? And draw a thought bubble on the turkey that says, I like beer. It's just so, I mean, no wonder they're bad at memes. These are horrible.
These are horrible. Anytime a family member brings up a passive-aggressive comment about anything you've ever done in your life that they don't approve of, consult the calendar and say, sorry, Mom, if I'd actually done that, I am sure I would have written it on my calendar.
I don't. And also, it's funny to me that, like, passive-aggressive is used derogatorily in this fucking list, which is a
passive-aggressive list.
It's like, if you don't have the guts to actually have debates with your family, do these passive-aggressive annoying things and act like a child. It's like, okay. Including making handprints to make a giant turkey.
Yeah, it's a very childish list, and it's essentially a way to, like you said, to avoid having actual discussions with relatives who disagree with you. It's like these are ways to just act like a petulant child.
Yeah.
And talk about projection. You know, she's assuming that if you have relatives who voted for Trump, they're going to say passive aggressive things to you. Why would you think that? Is it because you're passive aggressive?
Well, her family's probably passive aggressive because she surrounds herself with passive aggressive people. This is how she communicates and how she recommends you communicate to people. I mean, at least the GQ article was like, you know, you have a few options. Don't go. Like, I think it was the GQ. I wanted a different one, but it was like, at least not going is less passive aggressive. It's just like, you know, walking in and saying, screw you all, I'm not coming. And like, okay, fine. Anyway, so number 4, God, I can't believe I'm reading this. Build the festive toadstool centerpiece. Again, this is elementary school, right? It's elementary school. I don't, you know, draw one from Mario Kart. I'm like,
I don't understand this one. What's the joke here?
Stormy Daniels said that Trump's penis was shaped like the mushroom from Mario Kart. And apparently...
Somehow I managed to go this long without
I'm
knowing
sorry,
that.
Keri. I apologize for telling you that just now. Forgive me.
That's okay. Oh, wait, hold on. Dogs. Carter, we might have to edit these doggies out. Hold on.
I don't know. Should I edit the dogs out? I guess if you voted for Trump, you're supposed to be embarrassed or... I guess you're supposed to be embarrassed that Stormy Daniels thinks Trump's penis looks like a mushroom.
I think what this is telling me is that she doesn't really understand her Trump voting relatives at all.
I don't think she has any Trump voting relatives, first of all. But yes, she doesn't understand.
It's like you're writing this list to offend a person who doesn't exist. Like, I don't know anybody who would be who would be so like, oh, you made a toadstool centerpiece. I mean, I would be like I just said that. What does that even mean?
Yeah, no, I would honestly, if she did all this stuff at a Thanksgiving hour, I would document all of it. I would think it's
hilarious.
It not in the way she wants it to be funny.
Right.
Yeah, number 5 again. I mean, I just think the context you should have with this list is elementary school. Number 5, draw a fun Michael Cohen flip book. When was the last time you drew a flip book, Keri?
I mean, yes, she's like a child, and I don't know, it's crazy.
An action-packed flip book.
Spice up your table settings with fun for the whole family. An action-packed flip book where we see a Michael Cohen stick figure throwing Donald Trump under a bus before heading off to jail. End it with stick figure Cohen reminding everyone to vote Democratic. What?
First of all, it's vote Democrat. I just want to clarify. It's the Democrat Party, not the Democratic Party.
He says Democratic.
Yes.
It doesn't. Yeah.
I don't know. It's. I mean, I guess the Trump supporter is supposed to. I mean, if you think about it, this is. Does she expect the other side to do similar things? Like, is a Trump supporter supposed to take a little flip book of like, here's Donald Trump throwing Elizabeth Warren under a bus. Ha 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 ha. Like, I don't. Is that? Like, I don't. Who does that?
You know, it kind of reminds me of, so growing up, my family, I'm from South Carolina, and we were really huge Clemson Tiger fans. And you know, my dad went to Clemson, my grandfather's was just like the family school was, you know, we always went to all the games. And then my Aunt Dixie married a guy who from USC, and in the real USC, which is University of South Carolina. And so
not the film school.
Yes, correct. And it was this huge, so every year the Clemson Carolina game would happen right around Thanksgiving, and we would go to my grandma had this trailer on the lake that we could use for holidays and stuff. And based on whoever won, we would play pranks on each other. Like the Clemson fans would either get there early and decorate the whole trailer for Clemson, or they get there and decorate the whole trailer for Carolina. But this lady's list is kind of like, it's like a trickster prankster thing in that regard. It's like, here's some ways to, you know, set up the trailer to really piss off your Trump voting relatives.
Kind of, but it's not even good at that. Like, if this was the Clemson side and you're on the other, like if you're on the USC side and this is Clemson, you would be like, you guys are lame.
It's not in good sport. She doesn't like these relatives that she's doing this to.
Yeah.
It's not like,
she's also not good at it.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's what I mean. Like, this is you trying to troll. So the next one is, I told you so placemats. You're supposed to print out this letter that she wrote, which is the one I described, this kind of melodramatic, dear Trump supporters who say they love me. And print it out. Highlight every prediction that has come true so far. Spoiler, it's all of them. I've read them. It's not all of them, and she doesn't even really have explicit predictions. And the evidence of them coming true are like, you know, see, he's mean. Then laminate them to use as placemats. So, but the second part of this one I actually like. She says, or skip Thanksgiving altogether and mail that letter as your why I will not be attending. And I think that's the best idea of all these, because you can use the letter for kindling to have a nice fire in the fireplace and you don't have to deal with your SJW relative. Number 7, Moscow Mueller cocktails. Nice pun. God, grow up.
Serve these drinks in the traditional copper mugs, but add a tiny umbrella. Throw the umbrella on the ground and leave it blowing in the wind. Surely someone else will know what to do with it.
I think he like dropped his umbrella at some point because it was windy. I'm not sure, but
who? Why does
that's
why are these
so
things
embarrassing?
It's like I don't even get. That's when you know you've failed. You're trying to troll, but the person doesn't get the references you're making. It's like mushroom, umbrella.
Right. I don't know. I feel like I just thought of a better way to troll them back. You could actually all the things that you could find the list of all the things they hate about Trump, and you can probably find Obama saying everything that they think is horrible that Trump has said, because it's all, 8 years ago, the Democrats were arguing for a wall and border security, and, the Clintons were anti-gay marriage. And Trump actually wasn't even then, I don't think. But anyway, okay. Number 8, the perfect playlist. Tell everyone you are going to throw on some mood music while you eat. Then hit play on your What Happened audiobook.
This one makes me laugh.
Is What Happened Hillary's book? Is that is?
Yes, it is. Which I always thought that's such a funny name for that book. It's like, also because there's that joke where people would say like, what had happened? Like when you're trying to explain something in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
In a convoluted way. I just think that, I don't know, that's sad. If I had a relative do this and I would feel bad for them.
This is why this is why the Democrats, the title is reflective of why the Democrats are having trouble, though. It's a passive title. Right? It's not why I lost.
Yeah.
It's what happened.
Yeah, what happened.
It's very passive.
Well, I saw her doing promotion for it, some of the interviews she was doing, and they would say something like, even if they asked her, was there anything that you did that you could have done differently? She would kind of brush past that quickly and then go into all the reasons that had nothing to do with her, why she lost.
Yeah, Russia.
There's no self-reflection there at all.
None. But I think that's normal for the extreme left anyway. Okay, number 9. Score big during the game. You know what? I forgot that there was football on Thanksgiving, but that's just I'm a nerd. But yeah, people watch football. When it comes time to watch football, throw on your Colin Kaepernick jersey and or a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Constantly say, "I'm only watching for the Nike commercials." I mean, I guess if you're constantly saying that it would be annoying, but I don't know that I notice what people wear or give a crap. But I don't know what. I guess again, passive aggressive, right? It's this weird passive aggressive like. This is how to be the annoying family member that everyone will hate, not because they disagree with you, but just because you're an annoying little shit.
And only watching for the Nike commercials. This is this thing we've talked about before, where for some reason SJWs, for a portion of the left that claims to hate capitalism, they really love corporations. Any corporation that virtue signals for them, they're all on board. Like I had friends during the Super Bowl posting about how Procter and Gamble commercials made them cry because the Procter and Gamble commercials were, something about social justice. It's like, that's still a commercial, like for a major company. Why are you so emotionally? It's like hook, line, sinker, whatever. Like they know exactly how to get this audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy. Like I feel like if any one of us wanted to get support from people on the left, it's so easy. Like it's so obvious what to say and how to say it, and like the virtual. It's just this,
It's emotionally manipulative. Yeah,
I've got this I've got this ex business partner in a venture who he does this like virtue signaling stuff on Facebook, but it's always so funny to me because he'll be like, he doesn't ever read anything, like he never knows anything other than whatever the CNN headline is, right? So there's never any depth to anything, but he'll like virtue signal about how angry he is about something. I can't believe Trump, fucking whatever it is, some kind of fucking thing, right? Fucking Trump. And I just think I think he thinks that he's ballsy doing it, right? I think he thinks that he's like, look how much of a man I am. Like, I'm standing up to the fuck that. It's like, actually, you're such a pussy. Like, that's not hard to say. This, like, when you say that stuff, everyone in the Bay Area will love you. It's not like it takes no courage to say anything like that.
It's the status quo. That's why, like, the hashtag resistance. I don't get it. I'm like, you guys aren't resisting anything. You're marching in the streets for the status quo.
Right.
And I don't think they. I mean, they definitely don't think that's what they're marching for. But it just blows my mind because I feel like the media is very good, and the my side, the left, is very good at pulling people's strings.
Yeah.
And getting them to act as foot soldiers for things they don't realize that they're even acting for.
I think conservatives are good at it in some ways. I think they're good at like some fear kind of things. They're good at, and like some patriotism. Sometimes they're good at it, but not like the media and the left. I mean, they're much more masterful. When the right does it, it tends to be very two-dimensional and obvious. Like it's like, oh yeah, that's like they're nice job, right? It's like, yeah, the American flag and the soldier with one arm missing, or what. It's like, okay, yeah, like I get it. It's very obvious. But the left does seem to be much better at telling stories and being subtle, and like, you know, most of Hollywood is left, so a lot of good writers and actors and producers and people coming up with ideas. So
yeah.
Anyway, the last one is remember who you are. I mean, if you're gonna forget who you are, that's a separate issue. But apparently, you need to remember who you are and that you're not alone. And this is the other one. You're on the right side of history.
That's one of my biggest pet peeves.
I know. That's why I read it for you, Keri.
The right side of history. That's so arrogant. You don't know what side of history you're on.
Yeah.
You think you have the knowledge to be able to say I'm on the right side of history? Like that. We've talked about this before, but that it's opens up a huge blind spot. If you're so assured that you're a good person and you're on the right side of history, like you're not keeping an eye out for ways in which you might be a hypocrite or ways in which you might be manipulated. You're being manipulated. So
the other thing that I just think is weird about it is like, I mean, yeah, like I agree with what you just said. I also just think like, I don't really know what way things are going to go historically. I mean,
yeah,
there's been like millennia of shit in history at times, and like there's probably some guy who was on the wrong side of history 2,000 years ago, and then like the Dark Ages happened, and like he was on the wrong side. Like it was still good, but it was the wrong side of history. Like
right,
he's lost now, right?
And you can get people to go along, like large groups of people to go along with atrocities, and those people probably thought, like you do, that they were on the right side of history. They probably had good justifications for what they were doing.
Sure.
So that phrase, I see it all the time in the SJW left, and it's
I mean,
yes, it's what I meant.
I feel like if what they mean by the right side of history is like a benevolent universe perspective that things will work out and get better, and like, you know, we will eventually end up in some sort of utopia, then you're never on the right side if you're the one arguing for violence or shutting down free speech or being petty at Thanksgiving. Like those things are not part of the right side of history. Those things are childish.
Right.
So
I'm on the right side of history, so I can act like a petulant child.
Right.
And passive aggressively try and piss off my relatives because I'm a sore loser and I don't really want to try and understand people who disagree with me better.
Right, so that's the other thing. None of these are even about not only are they not about having any kind of like meaningful exchange of ideas, they're also not even about arguing and making like points. It's not like on the one hand, you know, really you should sit down and like dig into the ideas and have a meaningful discussion if you're going to talk about this stuff, right? On the other hand, you could at least just say how to defeat them in arguments about stuff. Here's some like quick facts or things to like, you know, when they say this, you say whatever, right? It's not even that. It's not even like dialogue is not part of this at all. I guess that's my point.
Right.
There's no dialogue here at all.
Well, and she did title it Tips for Trolling. So at least she's honest about this isn't about dialoguing.
That's true.
But it's bad trolling though. I don't think she knows her audience very well. If you think this is going to troll Trump voters, I think they would just find you kind of humorous if you did these things. I don't think they would get triggered or offended or whatever it is that she's hoping for.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. But. All right. So thank you, Amanda Dybert. So I guess the next thing we should talk about is this article. Where's that article, Keri, about the kid in the teacher getting in trouble in school?
Oh, yeah. So this is in the news lately, and I've been discussing it with a couple people. It's about the Daily Wire. Okay, their headline was male gym teacher punished for refusing to oversee middle school girl get undressed in boys' locker room. And so if you read through it, it's about this middle school teacher that who was told to supervise the boys' locker room, and he said he wasn't going to do it because there's a trans boy, so a biological girl who is now wants to be considered a boy, who's going to be changing in the room with the boys. And so he didn't want to see a little girl get undressed. And because of that, he's been reprimanded. I think they told him that they were going to transfer him to another school or put him on administrative leave.
Yep.
And of course, this is a hot button topic. I think that you're going to start seeing a lot more cases like this. But in discussing it with some of my friends in the SJW left, they took issue with the headline, and they were saying the headline was a lie. And I'm like, which part of the headline is a lie? Male gym teacher punished for refusing to oversee middle school girl get undressed in boys' locker room. Is it that you don't believe he was punished because administrative leave, putting him on administrative leave, that's punishment, or threatening him with that.
Yep.
But what I think it is, they view it as that's not a girl. That's the part they view as a lie.
Ah.
So they say the headline's a lie because that's not a girl. I'm like, well, here's the thing. I don't mind using any, someone's preferred pronouns if they, depending on who it is and how they ask, and that's fine with me. But I also don't think you should force that teacher to bend the very fabric of reality and pretend like he's not watching a female child get undressed.
Right.
Like, you can't expect him to stand there and be like, I'm not seeing a female child getting naked in front of me. I'm seeing a boy child. Like, it's just.
Well, see, and he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, right? Because if he did, parents would find out and be livid, and he would probably be called a sexual predator and be vilified for going in there and watching her. And obviously, if he doesn't, he's in trouble because he's not pretending that she's a boy. I was remember when we did this show with Mike Harlow recently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He said he looked up like how many trans men have given birth, or trans women, or whatever. I think he looked at how many trans men have given birth, right?
Yeah.
In the UK, and it was like a couple. And I was reminded of that because I was thinking, like, when people hear that, what they're thinking is, oh, there was like some medical breakthrough and someone had a sex change operation and like they're now able to give birth. But that's not what is happening in these cases. It's just a woman who identifies as a man gave birth. Like, that's not a story. It's not special. It's like you called yourself something different and gave birth. And so this is the same kind of thing. It's like she's calling herself something different, but it doesn't eradicate the complexity of having the male teacher watch her. And we can get into this topic. We were talking, earlier we were talking about what kind of things are kind of in the zeitgeist and that might be brought up by I just have this image in my head of the crazy SJW cousin or something that's going to come over. And so
at Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Although I happen to know that the Thanksgiving that I'll be going to, I'm pretty sure no one will be that cousin.
Right.
But regardless, I think the gender stuff's been in the news a lot lately, and I think it's worth diving into because I think that is one of those topics that will be discussed. And So there's the gender issue, and up until now, we've been told, look, sex is distinct from gender, right? And we even did a show about this, right? Sex is distinct from gender. Sex is male or female. Sex is biological. It's male and female, right? So don't worry. We're not trying to redefine sex. We're just talking about gender. Gender is how you identify, right? That's the argument that we've been told, right?
Right.
And of course, there's problems with that argument generally in that, where's the line between kind of how you identify and just random imagination? Like, I identify as an empty room sometimes and a dragon. I think we talked about that kind of stuff. It's like, well,
yes,
you're very imaginative. I don't know if that is really identity, and which may be a separate issue. And that has all these problems that we're talking about now with it, where someone identifies as the opposite gender or whatever. But it's gotten even worse, and I want to talk about how it's gotten worse because I read this article the other day, and even I was pretty surprised by this. This article was in the New York Times, and it's by. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong article. This article was by what's her name? It is in the New York Times. It is by Dr. Anne Fausto Sterling.
Okay.
And the title of the article, and she's a professor of biology and gender studies.
Okay.
Which interesting. I bet she's more a professor of gender studies based on this article. But nevertheless, the title of the article is "Why Sex is Not Binary. The complexity is more than cultural. It's biological too." So now we're entering the era where this idea is going to start becoming mainstream as well. Not just that gender is separate and gender is the identity, but this is how she starts the article. "Two sexes have never been enough to describe human variety, not in biblical times and not now." And she goes through, obviously I'm not going to read the whole article, but she goes through and the point she makes here is basically there are 5 layers of sex at birth that are present. This is what she calls them. And we're going to talk about what they are. The first one is the chromosomal layer. Right? This is whether you're XX or XY, or potentially an anomalous combination. Now, those chromosomes then lead to gonad development, and which is your testes or your ovaries, right? So these are the organs that will produce the gametes or gametes or whatever, however it's pronounced, that will then go on, like the ones that aren't they're reproductive cells, right, without pairs, unpaired chromosomes.
Right.
So those chromosomes then lead to basically a reproduction of themselves. Basically, that's the first kind of step, right? And then those organs then lead to, so that's the step number 2 is the gonadal layer. And then layer number 3, those then lead to releasing of hormones, which produce changes in your body. And so that's your hormonal layer. And then the hormones produce 2 things. One is the internal reproductive organs, like ovaries, or fallopian tubes, or that kind of stuff. And then and then your external genitalia. So those are layers 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. And so her argument is that even when you're born, there are these 5 layers of sex, because essentially the argument is that because one thing causes another and things can go wrong along the way, there's like a multitude, there's infinite gender or infinite sexes, I guess is what she would have to argue, right? And well, before I comment, like, how does this strike you? And because I could spout on this. I can.
A couple of things. It strikes me that a lot of people have been saying for a while now that they're the postmodernists, the Marxists, the people I call SJWs, that they're going to start going after the hard sciences. But the truth is, they've already been going after the hard sciences.
Right.
So this isn't. We're just starting to see it manifest now in articles like this in the New York Times. But it's been happening for a while, and this strikes me as someone who's already has a conclusion they want to reach, which is that biological sex is a social construct. And so then they're using language to work backwards and try and build an argument backwards.
Yep.
Instead of, so what's socially constructed here is this woman's opinion.
Yes.
But
that is true.
Yeah. And I think they are at war with the very notion of truth and the very notion of like facts, and like we've talked about this before, logic. And so it's necessary for them to break down, you know, at first it was, well, gender is a social construct, and now it's biological sex is a social construct. And it's necessary for them to attack it because, I mean, they're at the root of the postmodern, like neo-Marxist ideology is, I do believe it's this nihilism that we've talked about.
Yeah.
They don't really believe in anything.
No, and I think this, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, I think this kind of, quote, science fundamentally leads to the destruction of concepts completely, and which leads to the destruction of biology and science generally.
Yeah.
It's concept destruction. And she's relying on, frankly, I think she's relying partly on this kind of argument from authority. Well, I'm a professor of biology, so I can say this.
Yes.
And I think it's important for people to understand that just because she's a professor of biology, that doesn't allow her to violate the logic and scientific method. It doesn't allow her to violate the kind of laws of inductive and deductive logic. Like, you can still challenge her. And an example I would give is, you know, if you're if someone says to you, I'm going to bake you a cake, it's going to be a chocolate cake. Chocolate cake's your favorite. And you say, okay, great. And they take this cake out of the oven and they put the pan in front of you, and it's foul smelling. It's like soup that smells like roadkill, and it's cold. And they say, here's my chocolate cake. And you say, that's not chocolate cake. They can't then say, well, I'm a professional chef. Like, it doesn't matter whether they're a professional chef. It's still not chocolate cake, right? I mean, we've all been to restaurants where the food was horrible. Those people were professional chefs. And then we've all been restaurants like where the food was great. So the fact that she's a professor in biology doesn't allow her to destroy concepts and undermine thinking. And to this one to me is really important because it really isn't. It's a blatant attack on conceptualization. So maybe we should can I back up for a little bit and talk about just like sex in humans and
yes,
you know. So we have, and let's talk about the concept of induction. So philosophically, this concept of induction, right, is you look out at these instances in the world, right? And you need to categorize. In order for humans to be able to think, they need to categorize things. And they need to understand, well, these are ducks and those are sharks and this is a boat. And they need to come up with these concepts. Even and those are relatively simple concepts, right? The concept of a table or a chair. You know, if I show you something that's a piece of furniture, you're pretty quickly can figure out that that's a chair, even if you've never seen a chair exactly like that before, because what you've done since childhood is you've seen all these different types of furniture, and you've said, okay, well, all of these things are similar in this way, but they're different from these other types of furniture in this way. Gee, they're different from tables in this way, and you know they're different from bookcases in that way, right? But they're all under this category of furniture, which is different than category of things or whatever it is, right? And so you see similarities and differences, and you classify things, and you say, okay, well, now I have a concept for chair, and chair is this concept here, and these things fit into it, and the bookcase is over here. It's not part of chair, but they're all maybe in this greater category of furniture. And her argument amounts to, because there's edges to these categories where there's sometimes blurry lines, therefore the category is invalid, right? But you need the category to think conceptually. Like, I might show you a table that transforms into a chair because it's for saving space if you have a really small apartment and maybe it switches into a bed or whatever. And I might say, is it a table or a bed, Keri? What is it? Or a chair or a bed, right? And if you say, well, gee, I'm not sure, it has some attributes of a bed and it has some attributes of a chair, maybe it's both or maybe it's neither, I can't then say, aha, chairs don't exist. There is no category of chairs, right?
Right.
That's not true.
It's not true, but they don't believe in. They're basically saying that we're not allowed to have conversations like this because we can't agree on those categories. We can't agree on whether or not the chair exists. I don't know if I'm not making myself clear. What they're trying to do is make it impossible to communicate with each other.
Well, so I think they're successful.
They're so far they're proving very successful. So for example, with the countless genders thing, right? Like 72 genders or however, an infinite number of genders, infinite number of pronouns. So the idea that it is offensive for me to look at you, Carter, and to call you he is ridiculous. Because again, I'm looking at you and you look like a chair, and that's human nature, is to sort things and take care, because it's efficient.
Well, it's not just efficient, it's required for our survival. Our brains require conceptual thought, which requires induction and categories. In fact, you can't write her article without accepting that words have meanings. It's not possible for her to write this article without words meaning something. And we can just use some random words that she's got in this article. She uses the words internal and external, right? Well, what about stuff on the border? Like, is that internal or external? I guess those words don't exist. But I can't blow away the categories of internal and external simply because there's a boundary between them, or sometimes there's diffusion and overlap, and we don't know always that there's clear internal and external. It doesn't invalidate those concepts. And yet, so she's relying on the solidity of concepts and the ability that concepts communicate a very clear and understandable thing. She's relying on that to destroy concepts, which you can't do. So I want to go through what the concepts are, because I don't think everyone really understands some of this. At least maybe if you remember high school biology or junior high school biology. But right, so why are humans categorized as male and female generally? Well, humans are sexually reproductive, right? This is how our species reproduces. So in order to get genetic mixing, we have, unpaired chromosomes from one half, unpaired chromosomes from the other person, and we get genetic mixing, and that enables us to evolve much more quickly than if we didn't have sexual reproduction, if we had asexual reproduction. Now, that's fine, and humans are also sexually dimorphic, which means men and women have different characteristics that are physically observable, not just something beyond just their sex organs, and so that's what's normally supposed to happen, right? And so it's valid in biology because you study reproduction, and when you're studying a species, okay, the male species have these characteristics, the females have these, they combine. This is what happened. This is how you look for the dimorphism. All the things that she's talking about, her layers of sex at birth, right? Chromosomal, gonadal, fetal, reproductive organs, internal, external. Those are all results of this, right? Those are all different. Those are differences between the sexes. Incidentally, it is funny to me that the same people that make this argument also say that there's nothing different between men and women at all, which is funny. She does also admit that hormones affect brain development, which means there's a difference in the brains between men and women. Shh. Anyway, so this is what you have, but there are cases where errors are made, anomalies are made, right? A male is born with an extra X or more than one extra X. And there's something called Klinefelter syndrome, which is one of the most talked about and kind of common, where you get an extra X or extra two X's or whatever. Now, she's kind of claiming that because Klinefelter syndrome exists, first of all, it's called syndrome, which should give you an indication that it's an abnormality. But let's back off that for a second. That's not a separate category of sex, kind of provably biologically, because people have little or no sperm. They're infertile. So that's not how the species continues. That is a mistake. It's not how, right?
That is an abnormality. But they are using the existence of abnormalities to try and destroy the category. So I think you were saying to me, which is true, it's, you know, some people are born with 6 fingers.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we don't teach our children that humans have 6 fingers on one hand. You know, it's not.
We don't say they have an arbitrary number of fingers, because some people might be born with 6 and some people might lose a finger in an accident, and like, who knows how many fingers humans have?
Right.
It's like, no.
It's an infinite number of possibilities, Carter.
Yes. Right. And if you see what she's doing here, it becomes very obvious that she's just destroying concepts altogether. Right. And it doesn't mean that you're not ignoring the existence of people with anomalies, sexual anomalies, like extra X chromosomes or different hormone balances than would be expected from their chromosomal makeup, right? Yeah, that stuff happens. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that the categories are invalid. It just means that biology is not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It just means random stuff happens. Yes, it does. So it's a really weird... It's not weird. That's the wrong word. It's a dishonest evaluation of biology. She is relying on you to be afraid to question her because she is a professor of biology. She's relying on your reluctance to kind of argue with this she'll throw out like, well, there's chromosomal and gonadal and fetal and blah, blah. But really, one leads to another. It's like dominoes. She's like, well, this domino is supposed to fall over and hit this one and blah, blah, blah. And normally they either all fall over this way or they all fall over that way. But sometimes there's a mistake in between, and therefore there's more than 2 sides to dominoes or, you know, whatever. And I think she's relying on kind of her authority and hoping that you are not willing to kind of question the fact that she's tearing down the walls between concepts. And honestly, I think it's really, really dangerous. I think it will destroy biology completely.
Oh, it will. And the other thing that this does is now this allows the foot soldiers of SJW ideology to go and find the article like this that they can use when they talk to you. They appeal to authority. They're like, but this biologist says.
Right.
And so now it's established in the New York Times that this biologist says that there's no such thing as biological sex.
Right.
And I find that in my conversations just with everyday people, very frustrating that when I try to talk with them about their opinions or understand their thought process behind whatever opinion they hold, they oftentimes can't explain themselves. They would rather just give me someone else's op-ed.
Right.
Like, read this op-ed. Okay, I've read that person's op-ed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And I think there's this happens mostly with non-scientists. So I think if you're an engineer or a scientist, I think you have way less respect for scientists and engineers than if you're not, right? Because you work with people like that who make mistakes or let their opinions influence things all the time. But also you have a method for thinking that you're willing to apply, and you're willing to say, well, I'm not a biologist, but I understand concept formation, and I understand logic, and I understand induction, and I know how to think, and I've studied science generally, like I have a scientific background, so I can see that this is wrong. Yeah. I don't have to be a biologist. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of PhDs in biology who will argue with her also, but you don't have to be intimidated and say, well, this person's got a PhD in biology, therefore whatever she says is right. And that's not how science works. How science works is anyone can question it. Like that's how science works.
And you can point out, I mean, that's a fallacy too. Appeal to authority. It's like,
of course,
that doesn't make an argument.
Right.
It's also funny to me that the same people who they're very happy to criticize science and to say that science has been informed by bias and that science is a tool of the patriarchy and white supremacy and that science itself is, flawed. They're very happy to say those things, except when they want to be right. Except like with this woman, it's like science is a tool of the patriarchy, but hey, I'm a scientist, trust me. Like,
yeah, no, exactly. And the fact that you're making gloves with 5 fingers is oppressive because science.
Yeah, you should be making an infinite number of fingered gloves.
Yes, right.
So I saw, we'll just talk about how, you know, it's, when I was saying like the categories, it's efficient, it's necessary, as you said. I've seen people in my social media feed now, professors and other, not professors, but people who work in like these Orwellian sounding departments of, you know, bias and
sure.
Non-bias and discrimination. I've seen them having discussions on Facebook, trying to figure out how to ask every student's pronoun without it taking so long. They were basically like, it takes the entire class just to get everyone's pronouns out and to everyone to introduce themselves. And
I mean,
I'm
by
like,
the time you get to the end, someone might have changed their pronoun because gender's fluid.
Right. What are you doing? Just, that's not like, get to the material. I mean, this is at a medical school too. It was taking me the whole hour because everyone has to go around and introduce themselves and explain their pronouns. What? Like, I don't know. It's just not efficient. It's not efficient, and it's basically, it's coddling. I find it, a lot of this is very, like we've talked about, it's very narcissistic, this ideology. I am a special, unique snowflake. I have a special, unique gender expression, and my biology is also in question, you know, like
right. Yeah. No, it's
well, I mentioned
it is inefficient, but I think it's actually very effective at what they're trying to do, which is getting back to this nihilism, and they're just trying to tear things down. And right, and you start with things like this that are easy, but you know, if you give up on this, I mean, just an example, what's special about sex? Like nothing. So you could say this about anything, like, well, I have cancer. That cancer's not bad. It's an identity. My body just is different. Like, so the cancer could be a thing. Stop trying to destroy cancer because it's just a different way of being, right? It's like, well, that's not a, you know, and you can say that about anything. And I don't think it really stops. And I'm not saying that these people need to be corrected if people have these anomalies. Like, sometimes it's fine and it doesn't hurt them at all, and they can live happy and productive lives and should be treated with respect just like everyone else. But you know, I think the biological thing, the scientific thing to do here is say there's men and there's women, there's XX and there's XY, and then there are cases of anomalies that fall into this category, and it's a very small percentage. It's like, you know, whatever it is, 0.1%, where something happens and things don't all go the way that they're supposed to go, and you're born with 6 fingers, or you're missing a limb, or you're attached to your twin, or you have an extra X chromosome. That shit happens, right?
Yeah. Well, they're starting to use the language of that they've been using around the trans issue. They're starting to use it now for other what they're calling like transabled. So if you look up transabled, you'll find academics who are now using these same arguments to say that some people are born, like their identity is that they're disabled, even though physically they're not. And so there are people who are getting like limb amputations so that they can be their true self, because they identify as being differently abled, even though they're not. And if you think that that's science fiction and that's too far out there, like, just look it up. There are professors who are talking about this as if it's not abnormal.
Yeah, you were telling me about this, and I was shocked. I mean, first of all, I would have thought that the Hippocratic Oath would prevent a doctor from amputating someone's perfectly functioning limb, but I guess it doesn't.
I don't know. I don't know. Well, and speaking of that, I think in about 10 to 15 years, we're going to start seeing a lot of medical malpractice lawsuits because of kids who are you're letting children decide if they're going to take body altering hormones, and you know, and we don't let kids get tattoos. We don't let kids
drink,
make other medical decisions for themselves, or drink, or you know, wait. I just feel like wait until you're 18, like that.
I would say wait. Even, I mean, I talk to my daughter about this, right? the female brain she's female, so the female brain is done. It's not really done being developed until somewhere around the age of 24. So,
oh wow,
like, wait, right? Because doing that hormonal treatment or making like decisions early that and having kind of either surgery or hormone treatment, it's irreversible.
Yeah,
right? It's irreversible, and you're in the middle of developing. And I think you're right. I think the consequences, we don't know what the consequences will be from doing some of this stuff for a 15-year-old, and they're likely not good, and we're going to have to deal with them later. And it's all because we can't tell someone, you know what? No, we can't tell anyone no.
Right. We can't say no. But yeah, I think that people are going to start suing their parents as well, because like, you know,
sure,
you're supposed to protect me as a child.
Well, you can't in some states. California, you can't. They don't need your permission to go get gender reassignment treatment.
Well, as a child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Minors can do it without parents' permission.
Yeah.
Which is a reason to leave California if you're a parent. But, I mean, think about that. That's pretty horrible.
Yeah. I don't, part of the reason why I think this is this is successful is that they couch all of this in compassion. They sell it as compassion. And so if you have disagreements about it, it's like, if you even have a discussion like we're having about it, well, clearly you don't have compassion for people and you don't want to treat people fairly. And, you know, you're a transphobe or you're whatever kind of bigot. And so people are afraid to talk about it because they don't want to, because people are compassionate and they do care and they don't want to be labeled as being hateful or phobic or whatever. And I don't care. You can call me whatever.
You racist bigot.
So,
transphobe.
I just figured, look, if so many people are afraid to talk about it because of those things, then it's even more important for me to say things that, you know, to try and
no, absolutely. And speaking of Thanksgiving, when they bring it up at the table, talk about it. And you know what? I actually think, you know, there's this phrase, I don't even know who coined it, but there was this phrase like tough love, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even really like that concept, but there is this idea that like loving someone doesn't mean giving in to every whim that they have. And it doesn't mean withholding truth from them in an effort to protect their feelings. So, you know, and any parent kind of knows this, right? If your kid comes to you and says like, oh, I really want to be a brilliant artist, and they show you a picture of their thing that they painted and it's atrocious, right? the correct thing to do is to say, well, you need a lot of work. Like, you're not there yet. I mean, maybe I like how you use the color blue here, but like, it's, you know, you're pretty far along. Here's some books, and you're not there, right? You're not there.
It's not to get. Don't give them a trophy yet.
Right. And the reason for that is like, you could destroy their lives by saying, that is awesome, you should be an artist, right? Because maybe some things are not trainable, right? I mean, some things are just like, maybe you shouldn't. Or maybe a better example is, you know, I'm a short guy. If I had said like, hey, mom and dad, look, I'm playing basketball. Aren't I awesome? Right. First of all, I was horrible at basketball, even in being short. Right. So
was I.
Like, it would have been stupid for them to say like, great idea. You can make the NBA, drop everything else you're doing and focus on basketball. That it would have ruined my life. They had to say, you know, they would have had to say, look, first of all, let's just look at your genetics for a second. Like, you're never going to be tall enough to even reach the bottom of the net on a good day with jumping. So
yeah, that's
going to be a problem. You kind of suck you have bad hand-eye coordination here. It's really unlikely that you'll ever be in the NBA. You could be, I guess, maybe. But all the signs are really pointing against it, and it's not looking good. You know, why don't you go back to math? Because you were pretty good.
Right. But we're so afraid of short-term hurting people's feelings that we don't look at the long-term, how we could be hurting people because of the short-term. And we're so concerned with, I mean, this makes me think of a conversation I was having with friends this week about the different kinds of ways to speak truth with love. And one of those ways being corrective conversations with your friends, and how often or how infrequently we like to have corrective conversations with our friends, because if your friend is engaging in behavior that's not good for them and not good for their soul and not good for people who are their loved ones, it doesn't help them for you to help justify that behavior for them.
No, you're an enabler.
Yeah, you're an enabler. And so, the friends that I value the most are the ones who are not afraid to give me that corrective love, and so.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's why we have interventions. That's why if like Uncle Joe's an alcoholic, the family, corners him someday and they're like, look, cut it out or we're out of your life.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to force him to be better. And, obviously that's an extreme example, but, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, when you're at the table and this stuff is brought up, have those conversations, because the truth is there is not biological there's no biological justification for arguing that there's more than two sexes, other than saying there's two sexes and some anomalies. That's as far as biology will let you go. No matter who, no matter what professor writes in the New York Times otherwise, the fact that biology is complex and that one thing leads to another and things can go wrong, the fact that everything's not, super straightforward and sometimes things go wrong, that doesn't mean that the concepts are invalid. And it doesn't mean that there's an infinite number of actual sexes. So in the spirit of Thanksgiving, there's one more thing I want to touch on kind of quickly here, because I know we're basically at our time, although this is kind of the Thanksgiving Day special, so we can go as long as we want, really. But
yeah.
I want to talk about the myth of the noble savage. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but there is this myth that the white Europeans came over to North America and they were unusually brutal and, infected the native population with smallpox intentionally by handing out smallpox blankets and murdered and enslaved people. And the people that were here were kind of this, like tribes from Avatar, one with nature and never killing animals unless they were going to use all the parts of the animal and really needed it, and living in peace and harmony. And it was the evil white oppressors that came over and destroyed them all. And the smallpox blanket one is an easy one to debunk. There was no germ theory at the time.
Really?
Smallpox had devastated Europe, and yes, the native population caught smallpox from Europeans, but no one knew why. And the Europeans caught diseases from the native population. No one knew why. There was no germ theory. So there was no intentional attempt at genocide through handing out smallpox blankets, which is still talked about on the left as a myth.
I still believe that until just now.
No, it was prior to germ theory was not invented. No one knew why anything happened. It was just not true.
Okay.
So that's just a myth. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is, and actually there's a book that I'm thinking about. I haven't read this book, but I like the title's interesting, and I've read some articles on this subject. There's a book by a guy called George Feldman called Cannibalism, Headhunting, and Human Sacrifice in North America. It's important to understand that until very recently in history, all societies conquered each other. That's what they did. They conquered people, they enslaved people, and that was it wasn't a thing that the Europeans invented and did to others. The Native American tribes in the U.S., or not the U.S. at the time, in North America, if you go down south, you get the Aztecs and the Incas and the Mayans, they all human sacrifice, cannibalism, all this horrible crap. But even in the northern parts of America, they were constantly warring at each other, capturing slaves from other tribes, like forming alliances and then, betraying each other. And they would go murder and capture each other. And there was a lot of headhunting and there was some human sacrifice and cannibalism. And so the idea that it was this kind of noble avatar, one with nature, peaceful society, and the evil white man came in and ruined it all is just false. It's a false narrative.
So, but your point is that it's not that the Europeans didn't do those things. It's just that the representation of Native American tribes is false.
Well, I would say
Europeans didn't invent this. Humans did. Is that what you mean? Like,
that's my main point. It's like I'm not saying Europeans didn't do some horrible things. They did. They enslaved some people and they murdered some people. They didn't hand out smallpox blankets knowingly, so that's a myth. But they did do some things. But those things were normal. That's how, like, conquest was how humans spread from one area to another. That's what they did. And the Native Americans, if they had the technology, they would have gone to Europe and conquered Europe. Like, that was how they conquered each other in the same way. It just so happened that the Europeans came in and they were better conquerors. That's all. They were better conquerors because they had better technology. And as soon as the Iroquois got a hold of guns from the French, they went and slaughtered all their neighborhood tribes. Like, other neighboring tribes. Like, that's what they did.
Violence is a human invention.
Yes. It's not a European white male invention. It's a human invention. In fact, the only European invention is the concept of limited government and individual rights and freedom. Like, those are European inventions, right? But in American, but it's not violence. And so don't let your Thanksgiving Day SJW cousin get away with this narrative of, like, the evil white man came and destroyed the peace-loving Native Americans. That's just not true, right? Like, there were no peace-loving. I mean, I'm sure some were peace-loving, but it was kind of the same conflict over the same way it's been for millennia. People conquering each other. There was some trade. Yeah, like sometimes people had truces and they got along and they bought Manhattan for whatever it was, like a few necklaces or what. I don't remember what they bought Manhattan for, but something super cheap. Yeah, sometimes they traded, and on Thanksgiving, it looks like there was obviously it's unclear, but it looks like there was some collaboration. It's hard because the Native Americans had no written history, so like the oral history is very, very weak, and we don't really know. But yeah, they got along sometimes, sure. But this notion that it was like evil Europeans coming and conquering people is, and that was unusual, and it's a sin unique to Europe is false. That's all.
I'd never really thought about that way before. Because I have just, well, I know there were certain Native American tribes that, let me back up. I don't know. I believe there are some Native American tribes who were very peaceful, who weren't warring with others, right? Like, maybe. I don't know enough about it.
I don't know. It's not clear because they didn't have a written history. So it's not super clear, and I'm not an expert here, but there were plenty of warring tribes, and some things we do know about because Europeans wrote about them. So, for example, the Iroquois getting guns from the French and then going and slaughtering all their enemies, and then slaughtering the people they had allied with before because they didn't need them anymore because they slaughtered their enemies. Like, yeah, that's the kind of shit that happened, right? And it's not good. It's gruesome and it's horrible, but that's how humans behaved.
Human history is pretty gruesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not excusing that kind of behavior. I'm just saying you can't use it to paint this picture of like the evil white man. It's like, no, evil man and humans. Like that's what humans do, right? And that's what they did. And someone invented this idea of like, hey, how about the non-aggression principle, basically? Someone was like, hey, how about we have like an area of land where there's like rights and we don't just conquer and that's a good idea. That's a new invention, and it didn't come from the Native Americans.
There's a great so I don't know.
And by the way, after I had said that, I don't want to. We don't get white people don't get to take credit for that, and white people don't get the guilt for doing any of those things because you and I weren't born. So I'm not saying like yay us because we did something. You and I didn't do shit. But we didn't do anything bad and we didn't do anything good back then. We weren't born, and that's what individualism means. It means not blaming you for any crimes or taking credit for accomplishments of your race because you didn't do them.
Right.
But sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I didn't want to.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I read something about, I think Martin Luther King wrote something about the principles of non-aggression. And that was the first time I had read about those principles. I don't know if it was a speech he gave or he like enumerated them.
Yeah, I mean, the libertarians use this phrase non-aggression principle quite often, right? It's kind of the basis for a lot of libertarian thought is this idea that the use of force is wrong. The use of the initiation of force is wrong in all cases, right? And that's kind of, if you had to sum up like libertarian philosophy in one phrase, it would probably be the non-aggression principle. It would be the use of the initiation of force is wrong in all cases,
right?
And some people obviously take that in different directions, and there's different interpretations of what that means, and people argue over it. But in general, that's kind of the libertarian philosophy. And the libertarian philosophy, just to be clear, is basically the philosophy that the country was founded on, compared to conservative and liberal that we see today. The libertarians are much more in line with the founding fathers. That doesn't make them right. That would be an argument by authority, but that's kind of what they are. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. I'm going to go read this. Well, it'll be at the bottom of my reading list because I have all that to read, but I am going to go read about this because I've always been curious. This book called Cannibalism, Headhunting, and Human Sacrifice in North America. I'm curious about how much of it actually happened, how much of it didn't happen. Were there peaceful tribes who did nothing and that kind of thing? Yeah.
That's going to be your holiday reading.
Maybe. I still haven't finished Jordan Peterson and some other stuff. So,
yeah.
I've got some other stuff. Okay. So, and by the way, just to be clear, Louis Pasteur is the inventor of germ theory in 1860. So,
okay.
So yeah, I guess that's how to spend your Thanksgiving. We like talk about the trans issue, talk about sex and gender if it's brought up, and push back on this narrative, because they're destroying concepts.
And I would also say, for like, if you have family members or people at your Thanksgiving who disagree with you, that's a blessing because you have a chance to have interesting conversations with people and try and understand people who disagree with you a little better, and to try and articulate your beliefs and not be afraid of doing so, but to articulate your beliefs, not like that woman's article that we read, like going in there passive aggressively trying to take digs at people,
right?
But just, trying to, especially if you have relatives who are ideologues of any type, who are really rigid, you can sort of lead by example in the way that you interact with them. Even if they're horrible to talk to, you can treat them in a civil way, and you can at least try and have a real conversation with them and not just try to be right.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm in the, we're having our November civility dinner tonight. So I'm in I'm in the mood of like, talking with people you disagree with.
No, it's good. And this is, I think if you switch to this mindset, which I'm about to describe, it makes life a lot more fun, and it makes conversation easier. I don't care if I'm right. I'm just really curious about the truth, right? And that makes it very different. So if you have these conversations, like I think I'm right about a bunch of stuff, we all do, right? But if you have conversations with someone that you're worried, it's easy to trigger them. If you say the wrong thing, they're gonna go crazy. Or if you don't want mashed potatoes thrown at your face at the table. Often just asking questions is really interesting. Like, oh, why? Like, oh, where did you think that? Like, why did you think that? Well, what about this? Like, just asking questions can be really revelatory. And sometimes it can lead to getting mashed potatoes thrown in your face anyway, because people who don't have answers to those questions can get pissed off that you're asking those questions. Yeah. But it's a pretty easy way. And if you're truly curious, it can be fun to ask those questions. We were talking about what were we talking about the other day with, I don't remember. It had something to do with like asking questions from someone from a very philosophic high level.
Well, one thing I've found too is when you have conversations, people often have answers to why. Like you can ask them, well, why do you believe that? And people have a lot of whys.
Sure.
But if you ask them how, then you can sometimes see their programming, if they are an ideologue, stop.
Oh, like give me an example. That's interesting. Do you have an example?
Well, yeah. So like, why do you believe in open borders? Okay. So they would probably have a lot of reasons. I'm just picking something.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great one.
So then how would you implement that? How would you suggest that how would this work? Or like the hate speech laws, like why do you believe there should be laws against hate speech?
Yeah.
So how would we determine what is hate speech? How? They don't, a lot of times don't have answers to how.
Interesting.
Because they haven't thought through it. And so they have their whys. Everybody has reasons for why they believe something, but it can be really interesting when you start to explore the how.
Yeah,
I think
that makes sense. And actually encouraging people to think in principle, it's helpful as well. So if like, oh, there should be a law for XYZ or whatever, kind of helping them identify, okay, well, what principle is that? And like, what does that mean generally? Like, if that's the principle, then it's like usually it bleeds well beyond the narrow thing that they're thinking of, right? Oh, you shouldn't be allowed to say XYZ. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So like, what's the principle there? Like, the government should be able to what? Put you in jail? Well, no, just fine you. Okay, what if you don't pay your fine? Well, then they have to put you in jail. Okay, so eventually they're putting you in jail, right? Like, okay. So they put you in jail for what did you do? You said what thing did you say? Well, you said something that made this person upset. Okay. How do you know whether it was like legitimate or not? Like, how do you define it, and you can kind of start going. There's a famous there's another kind of common libertarian argument style or argument tool maybe, which is called I think Stefan Molyneux calls it against me, but it predates him because I've used it and heard about it before I heard him talk about it. But I like the way he describes it. It's this against me argument where you can kind of say like, okay, instead of, when people propose, say, a speech law or whatever, if it's a relative of yours or someone who cares about you, you can really start talking about, well, let's imagine it's me that does like, what if I do X, Y, and Z, right? Mm-hmm. Should I go to jail? Showing them how, like, oh, well, let's take that principle and then let's apply that principle consistently. And like, so you're saying that I should go to jail if I don't call that jerk that I don't like by the pronoun that he or she or Z said I should that day.
Right.
Is that what you're like? I should go to jail?
Practical, like real examples.
Yeah. Like real personal examples. Like, oh, are you saying that I should be forced to do this? Mm-hmm. Like, oh. So like, if I don't do it, you think I should, like, men with guns should come in here and drag me away? Is that... Because that's the logical conclusion to any government.
Yeah.
Or like that's what the government is. It's men with guns. So.
Oh, the doggies are telling me it's time to.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is time.
Oh no.
We should wrap up, and we should wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, Keri. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, Carter.
Let the dogs do their thing.
Guys. I'm sorry, I've got a dog party to go.
Yeah, go do your dog party and enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll talk later. And happy Thanksgiving to everyone else.
Okay.
Thanks for joining Unsafe Space. Thanks for being with us today. Have a great Thanksgiving yourself, and I don't know, enjoy arguing with your relatives. Enjoy. Maybe think of some favorite thing that Trump has done. If you really want to troll them, think of your favorite Trump accomplishment. Mine is that he issued an order basically saying that 2 federal regulations have to be killed for every new federal regulation introduced, which as a small government person, I kind of love that one. So anyway, do you have any favorites, Keri, or no?
That Trump has done?
You didn't prep for that because I didn't ask you, so maybe you can't think on the spot.
No, I mean, that sounds good. That sounds like a good thing to get rid of. For every regulation, get rid of 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he's done, it's surprising to me because I think he's done, let me just say this. He hasn't done any of the catastrophic things that I was promised he was going to do. so that's enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, none of those things really happened.
He mostly just tweets things that imply them, but doesn't actually do anything. So,
yeah. So,
all right. Well, have a good Thanksgiving.
Okay. I'll see you guys later.
All right. Take care.
I'm going to take care of this doggy.
All right. Bye. Everyone else, happy Thanksgiving. And you can follow us at Unsafe Show on Twitter. You can go to unsafeshow.com. You can download podcasts on, you can look for Unsafe Space on your favorite podcast app. and patreon.com/unsafe space. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you next time. Every Thursday at 11 a.m., the show Deprogrammed with Keri. Bye-bye.